The alien wife wants 15 kids. One is nowhere near Eno. PNG Jake had always lived a life that was simple, predictable, and comfortable. As an engineer working for the Intergalactic Council, his days were spent designing machines and systems that helped maintain peace and order across galaxies. He was content with his work, never imagining that his life would be changed by an encounter with an alien world. It all began when Jake received a summons from the Council, a request to travel to a distant planet. The message was brief, but it was clear. His expertise was needed for a critical mission that could affect the entire galaxy. He was told very little about the specifics, only that it was a matter of great importance. He packed his things and boarded the intergalactic shuttle, unsure of what awaited him. The journey took several days, and as the planet's atmosphere came into view, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to step into something far bigger than he could ever have imagined. Upon landing, Jake was greeted by a delegation of alien officials. They were from a species he had never encountered before, tall, elegant beings with skin that shimmered like moonlight. Their leader, Princess Nyra, stood at the forefront. She was regal, her deep green eyes filled with authority, yet there was something about her that drew Jake in. It wasn't just her beauty, it was the power that radiated from her presence. "Jake," she said in a voice that was calm and firm, "I have a proposition for you. One that will shape not only your future but the future of my people." Jake listened intently as Nyra explained her vision. Her planet, once a thriving civilization, was now on the brink of collapse. The population was dwindling, and their species was at risk of extinction. Nyra believed the key to saving her people lay in creating a new generation, one that could carry their bloodline forward and ensure the survival of their race. Her solution: she wanted to have children, lots of them. In fact, she needed a human partner to help her fulfill her goal of having 15 children, each of whom would possess the strength and abilities necessary to ensure her species' survival. Jake was taken aback. He had heard of intergalactic unions between humans and aliens, but the idea of fathering 15 children with a stranger was beyond his understanding. He couldn't help but question the practicality of it all. Was this even possible? Was it ethical? He was no stranger to the pressures of duty, but this was a whole new level. Nyra sensed his hesitation and softened her tone. "I understand that this is a lot to ask," she said, "but my people have always been focused on survival. The task before us is monumental, and I cannot do it alone. I need a partner, someone whose humanity will help strengthen our bloodline and keep our future intact." Jake felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. He had never imagined his life would lead him down such an unexpected path. He had never been one to shy away from a challenge, but this was different. It wasn't just about the technology he worked with. It was about a commitment that went far beyond anything he had ever thought possible. "I'm just an engineer," Jake said, his voice shaking slightly. "I don't know if I'm the right person for something like this." Nyra smiled gently, her eyes never leaving his. "You are exactly what we need. Your strength, your resilience, and the very essence of humanity you carry are the qualities that will make our children strong. Together, we can build something greater than any of us could achieve alone." Jake's heart raced as he processed her words. It wasn't just about the children. It was about the future of an entire species. His decision wasn't just personal. It was about the survival of a people who had reached out to him, asking for help. He could refuse, walk away, and continue his life as it was, but could he live with that choice, knowing the consequences? "You're asking me to be a father," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. 15 children, I'm not sure I can handle something like that." Nyra's gaze softened as she stepped closer to him. "I don't ask this of you lightly," she said. "But the task is great, and the reward will be even greater. Our people need you, Jake. They need the strength of your humanity to help us survive. Will you help us build the future?" Jake thought about the life he had led so far, the predictable routine, the safe, familiar world he had always known. This was something entirely different. The responsibility of raising 15 children was a burden he hadn't anticipated, but the weight of Nyra's words pressed upon him. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about something far bigger than anything he could have imagined. He stood there for a moment, staring at the alien princess, his mind racing. He had always prided himself on making logical decisions, on understanding the risks and rewards of every choice. But this was a choice that didn't have a clear answer. It wasn't about science or engineering. It was about human connection, about something deeply emotional and personal. "I'll do it," Jake finally said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. "I'll help you. I don't know what this will mean for me or for us, but I'll do it." Naira's eyes lit up with relief and gratitude. She reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you, Jake. Together we will ensure the future of our people. Together we will build a new legacy." Jake nodded, his thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. He had just made a decision that would change the course of his life and the life of an entire species. There was no turning back now. As he followed Naira deeper into her world, he couldn't help but wonder what the future held for him, for her, and for the children they would one day raise together. Jake's life had changed completely since he agreed to help Princess Naira. The decision to join her in this strange, almost unbelievable journey was one he could not undo. He had stepped into a world beyond his understanding, one that was both magnificent and terrifying. The days on Naira's planet were long and filled with strange new experiences. The landscape was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The air was thick with an energy that made everything seem alive: plants, animals, even the rocks seemed to hum with life. The sky was a deep violet, with swirling clouds that shifted as if they had a mind of their own. The people of Naira's world were tall, their skin glowing faintly in the soft light of the twin suns. They moved gracefully, as if every step was part of a carefully choreographed dance. Jake often found himself overwhelmed by the beauty of it all, but there were moments when the weight of the task ahead hit him hard. He had been told that his job was to help Naira build a family that would carry on her people's legacy, but no one had truly explained what that meant. What did it take to raise 15 children, especially when those children were meant to be powerful beings capable of shaping the future of an entire species? Naira was kind, but she was also distant. She had a duty to her people that could never be ignored. Jake understood this, but it didn't make it any easier. He had agreed to be a father, but what kind of father would he be in this strange new world? The thought kept him up at night, staring at the alien stars through the window of his room. One evening, as Jake sat alone in the vast, quiet palace, Naira entered the room. She moved with the same grace she always did, her green eyes soft but filled with purpose. "Jake," she said, her voice a smooth melody that seemed to echo through the stillness, "how are you adjusting?" Jake looked up at her, his brow furrowed. "It's different," he said, his voice uncertain. "This whole thing, it feels like it's moving too fast. I'm not sure I'm ready for all of this." Naira walked toward him, her gaze never leaving his. "I know this is difficult, but you must understand that time is not on our side. My people have lived for centuries, and yet we are at the brink of extinction. The future of my species depends on the success of our family." Jake sighed, rubbing his temples. "I understand that, but it's not just about having children. It's about raising them, teaching them. I don't know anything about raising children in a world like this." "Everything is different here." Naira sat beside him, her expression softening. "I know you are afraid, Jake, but you are not alone in this. I will be by your side every step of the way. We will do this together." Jake met her gaze, his heart heavy with the weight of the responsibility he had taken on. "I want to believe that," he said, his voice quiet. "But what if we're not enough? What if I can't give them what they need?" "You will," Naira said firmly. "You are human. Your strength, your resilience is something we need. You bring something that my people have lost, something that will make our children stronger. Together, we will ensure they are ready for the challenges that await." Jake wasn't sure if he believed her, but he didn't have the luxury of time to question it. He had agreed to this, and now he had to see it through. The next few weeks were a blur of preparations. Jake spent his days learning about Naira's people and their customs. He studied the complex history of her world, the rich traditions that had shaped her society for millennia. The more he learned, the more he realized how little he understood about the weight of what he was about to become a part of. But there were also moments of connection. Jake found himself growing closer to Naira, not just as her partner, but as a friend. They shared stories of their worlds, of their hopes, their fears. Naira spoke of her childhood, of the time before the war had ravaged her people. She told Jake about her dreams for the future, a future where her people would thrive once more. One evening, as the two of them stood on the balcony overlooking the planet's vast oceans, Naira turned to Jake. "I know this is hard for you," she said, "but I need you to trust me. Trust that this is the right path. Trust that together we can make a difference." Jake looked out at the horizon, the twin suns sinking into the ocean, casting long shadows across the water. He wanted to trust her. He wanted to believe that what they were doing mattered. But doubts still lingered in the back of his mind. Could he really be the father that these children needed? Could he truly help bring about the future Naira envisioned? The next few months were filled with uncertainty, but also moments of joy. Naira and Jake grew closer, their bond strengthening with every passing day. They laughed, they argued, they grew as partners in ways Jake had never anticipated. He was no longer just a man from Earth. He was becoming a part of Naira's world, a world that had once seemed so foreign to him, but now felt like home. The first signs of their children began to show, and with them, the realization of how unique their offspring would be. Naira's species had always been powerful, but their children, the children Jake would father, were something else entirely. They were destined to be stronger, faster, more resilient than anything Naira's people had ever known. As the months passed, Jake found himself falling into a routine. He spent his days in the royal palace, working alongside the other leaders and scholars, helping to prepare for the arrival of their first child. He learned more about alien biology, how Naira's species could carry multiple children at once, and how the blending of human and alien DNA would result in offspring with abilities far beyond normal human limits. The thought was overwhelming at times, but Jake had no choice but to accept it. He was part of something much bigger than himself now, and the responsibility he had taken on was one he couldn't ignore. And then, one day, the time came. Naira's first child, a daughter, was born. Jake stood beside her as the royal healers worked to deliver the baby, a tiny creature with shimmering green skin and bright, intelligent eyes. The moment he held her in his arms, he felt a connection unlike anything he had ever known. This was his child, a new life, a symbol of everything he and Naira had worked toward. He looked at Naira, and for the first time he saw a reflection of his own doubts in her eyes. But there was also something else, something powerful, something unspoken. They had created this life together, and together they would see it grow. The birth of their first child marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, but it was only the beginning. There were still many more children to come, and with them, the promise of a new future, one that would carry the weight of both human and alien hopes. As Jake looked down at the tiny face in his arms, he realized that this journey was far from over. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and obstacles. But he also knew that with Naira by his side, he wasn't alone. Together, they would face whatever came next. The days grew longer as Jake continued his life alongside Naira on her alien world. The birth of their first child marked a new chapter, but the road ahead was far from smooth. As their family grew, so did the complexity of their situation. Jake's role had become more than just a father. He was now involved in the politics of Naira's royal family, and it was a world he hadn't expected to enter. Naira's people were ancient, their civilization rich with history and culture. But as the years passed, they faced the reality of dwindling numbers and the need for a new generation. The pressure on Naira to ensure the survival of her species had never been higher. The birth of their first child, Lyra, was a powerful symbol, but it was only one step in a much larger plan. Jake had learned quickly that the politics of the royal family were complicated. There were those who supported Naira's decision to bring a human into their world, believing that it would give her people the strength they needed. But there were others who saw it as a betrayal. They believed that Naira's decision to marry outside her species would weaken their bloodline and bring shame to their legacy. Naira's family, in particular, was divided. Her mother, the queen, had always supported her, but her uncles and cousins were less convinced. They feared the unknown, and they believed that human involvement in the royal lineage would only bring instability. The tension within the royal family grew as the number of children Naira had with Jake increased. With each child, the stakes got higher. The children were different from the rest of the royal family, their powers stronger, their growth faster. Some of them exhibited abilities that even Naira had not anticipated. Lyra, the firstborn, had already shown an incredible affinity for manipulating energy, a gift her mother had never possessed. Jake watched with a sense of awe as their children developed, but he also felt a growing sense of isolation. He was not one of them. Despite his role as a father, he was still an outsider in this world. Naira's people were kind, but there was a certain distance, an unspoken barrier that Jake couldn't cross. He often found himself lost in his thoughts, questioning whether he truly belonged in this alien world. One evening, as Jake sat in a quiet garden, watching the twin moons rise over the horizon, Naira approached him. She had been busy with the royal court all day, dealing with matters of politics and family. Her face was drawn, and there was a weariness in her eyes that Jake had come to recognize. "Jake," Naira said softly, sitting beside him, "I know this is hard for you." Jake turned to look at her, his expression weary. "I don't know how much longer I can do this, Naira. Every time I think I'm starting to understand this world, something new comes up. It feels like I'm always on the outside, no matter how hard I try." Naira reached out and placed a hand on his. "You are not on the outside. You are a part of this now, a part of me. Our children are proof of that." Jake sighed, his gaze returning to the horizon. "But I'm not like them, Naira. I'm not one of your people. I'm just a human, and I don't know if I'm ready for everything this world demands." Naira was silent for a moment, considering his words. "I understand," she said finally. "This world is unfamiliar to you, and I know it's not easy, but I need you, we need you, our children need you." Jake looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He knew she was right, but it didn't make it any easier. The challenges they faced were overwhelming, and the pressure to succeed was immense. Jake wasn't sure if he was up for the task, but there was no turning back now. The political tensions within the royal family continued to rise. Naira's uncles and cousins began to question the legitimacy of the children she had with Jake. They worried that their powers would disrupt the balance of the royal lineage. Some of them even suggested that Jake's influence over Naira's bloodline could weaken the future of their people. Naira's mother, the queen, tried to quell the growing unrest, but the whispers of dissent grew louder. Jake could sense the tension in the air whenever he entered the royal court. He was still an outsider, no matter how many children he fathered, no matter how much he loved Naira. One day, during a meeting with the royal council, the topic of Jake's role in the royal family came to a head. His presence was a matter of great debate. Some of the council members argued that the union between Jake and Naira was an unprecedented move that could lead to disaster. Others, however, saw it as an opportunity to strengthen their bloodline and ensure the survival of their people. As the debate raged on, Jake felt a deep sense of frustration. He had never intended to be a pawn in a political game. He had simply wanted to help Naira, to support her in her mission to save her people. But now, it seemed that every move he made was being scrutinized. Every decision he made was tied to the future of an entire species. When the meeting finally ended, Naira approached Jake. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I never wanted this for you." Jake shook his head. "It's not your fault. I knew what I was getting into. I just didn't realize how complicated it would all be." Naira placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes filled with concern. "We will find a way through this, Jake. Together we will face whatever comes. Our children, they are our future, and they are worth any sacrifice." Jake looked into her eyes, feeling a surge of emotion. He had come so far, but there was still so much uncertainty ahead. The political pressure, the expectations of Naira's people, the growing power of their children, all of it weighed heavily on him. But in that moment he realized something. No matter how difficult it became, he couldn't walk away. He had made a promise to Naira and to their children, and he was determined to keep it. As the days passed, Jake and Naira continued to face the challenges that came with their growing family. They learned to navigate the complexities of royal politics, to balance their love for each other with the responsibilities they both carried. They discovered that the path ahead would not be easy, but it was a path they would walk together. The children continued to grow, each one showing signs of their unique abilities. Lyra, the firstborn, had become a beacon of hope for Naira's people. She was strong, intelligent, and compassionate, and her powers only seemed to grow with each passing day. Jake couldn't help but marvel at her, at how much she had already accomplished in such a short time. She was a living testament to the bond between him and Naira, a symbol of what they could accomplish together. But as the children grew, so did the challenges. The political tensions within the royal family continued to escalate. The council's doubts about the legitimacy of Jake's role only grew stronger, and the whispers of rebellion spread like wildfire. Jake knew that something had to change if they were to survive. It was in the quiet moments, when he was alone with Naira, that he found solace. Together, they would figure out a way to overcome the obstacles that stood in their way. They would fight for their family, for their children, and for the future they had promised to build. And so the journey continued with no clear end in sight. But Jake had made his choice, and he was determined to see it through, no matter what it took. Jake stood at the edge of the palace's grand balcony, staring out into the horizon. The twin suns had just set, casting long shadows across the city below. The air was cool, and the quiet of the night felt comforting, though the weight on Jake's shoulders seemed never-ending. He had come so far, but he wasn't sure how much longer he could bear the pressure. Every day, the burden of his decision to be part of Naira's world seemed heavier. The challenges they faced as a family were starting to feel insurmountable. Despite his doubts, Jake had learned to adapt. He had become a father, and though his children were not fully grown, they already showed signs of the power and potential Naira had promised. Lyra, their firstborn, was a source of pride for both of them. She was strong and intelligent, with a deep curiosity about the world around her. The other children followed closely behind, their abilities growing faster than Jake could keep up with. They were all unique, with each child showing traits and gifts that far surpassed human limits. But as proud as he was of them, there was a sense of unease that lingered. The political tension within Naira's royal family was escalating. Naira's uncles and cousins, who had once supported her decision to marry a human, were now questioning the wisdom of it. They feared that the growing power of Jake's children might threaten their bloodline, the very foundation of their royal legacy. Every step Jake took, every action he made was now scrutinized, and he could feel the walls closing in. Naira had been doing her best to balance her duties as a leader and as a mother. She had tried to calm the unrest in her family, but the situation was getting worse. Her own mother, the queen, had always been supportive of her decision to marry Jake, but even she had begun to express concerns. The whispers of rebellion within the royal court were growing louder. It felt like no matter how hard they tried, there was always someone ready to tear them apart. One evening, after another tense meeting with the royal council, Naira approached Jake. Her face was tense, her usual calm demeanor strained. It had been a long day for both of them, but it was clear that the weight of their situation was taking a toll on her as well. "Jake," she said quietly, standing beside him, "we need to talk." Jake turned to face her, his eyes tired. "I know." "The council, they're not giving us a break, are they?" Naira shook her head. "They want answers, Jake. They want assurances that our children won't disrupt the balance of the royal line. They're afraid of what our family represents." Jake sighed deeply. "I knew it would be difficult, but I didn't think it would get this bad. Every time we take a step forward, it feels like we're pushed 2 steps back." Naira looked down for a moment, her voice soft. "I don't want to lose you, Jake. I don't want to lose everything we've built together, but I can't keep fighting this battle alone. We need to find a way to end this, for our children's sake and for the future of my people." Jake reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I don't want to lose you either, Naira, but I don't know if I can keep doing this. I feel like I'm losing myself in all of this." Naira met his gaze, her eyes filled with both determination and fear. "You're not losing yourself, Jake. You're finding a new path. This is a difficult journey, but we're in it together. We have to believe that what we're doing is worth it." Jake nodded, though the doubt still lingered in his heart. "But what if it's not enough? What if everything we're doing is just going to fall apart?" "Then we'll rebuild it," Naira said, her voice firm. "We'll rebuild it together." The next few weeks were filled with even more tension. The council continued to pressure Naira and Jake, demanding answers and threatening to strip away the legitimacy of their children's place in the royal family. Jake felt more and more like a stranger in a world that was not his own. He had promised Naira that he would stay, that he would help her, but the constant battles were starting to wear on him. One day, as he walked through the palace, he passed by a room where Naira and her closest advisors were meeting. He couldn't help but overhear parts of the conversation. It was clear that the council's doubts were growing, and the pressure to act was becoming unbearable. The tension was reaching a breaking point, and Jake knew that something had to change. When the meeting ended, Jake entered the room and found Naira sitting at the table, her face pale with exhaustion. The weight of the situation was clearly taking its toll on her. "I overheard part of that," Jake said quietly. "This isn't going to end well, is it?" Naira looked up at him, her eyes tired but resolute. "I don't know, Jake. I wish I had all the answers, but right now, it feels like the world is closing in on us. I don't know how much longer I can keep this fight going." Jake sat down beside her, taking her hand in his. "You don't have to do this alone, Naira. I'm with you. We'll figure it out together." She squeezed his hand, a small, grateful smile tugging at her lips. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Jake. You've been my strength when I had none. I just don't want to lose everything we've worked for." Jake looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He knew what they were facing was bigger than either of them. It wasn't just about their family anymore. It was about the future of an entire species. They had to find a way to overcome the obstacles that lay ahead, no matter what it took. Later that evening, as Jake sat alone in the quiet of his room, he reflected on everything that had happened. The challenges, the doubts, the endless pressure, it all felt like too much. But deep down, he knew he couldn't walk away. He had made a promise to Naira, and he had made a promise to their children. No matter how difficult it got, he was determined to see it through. The next day, Jake and Naira made a decision. They would confront the council, once and for all. It was time to put an end to the uncertainty and show the royal family that they were not going to back down. They stood together before the council. Naira's royal family gathered around them. The tension in the room was palpable, but Naira spoke first, her voice clear and unwavering. "We are here today to end this," Naira said, her gaze sweeping across the room. "You've questioned my decisions, my choices, and my family, but I will not let you tear us apart. Our children are not a threat. They are the future of my people, and I will not allow anyone to take that from us." Jake stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "We are here to stay," he said, his voice steady. "Our family is strong, and we will fight for it." Together, there was silence in the room as the council members exchanged uneasy glances. The tension was thick, but Naira and Jake held their ground. They had made their stand, and they were not going to back down. In the days that followed, the royal family began to shift. The council's doubts were not easily erased, but the strength of Naira and Jake's resolve had left a mark. Slowly, they began to win over some of the skeptics, and their children's place in the royal family became more secure. It wasn't easy, but they had faced the challenge together. And though there would always be obstacles ahead, Jake knew that they had taken the first step toward building the future they both wanted. With each passing day, their family grew stronger, and the bond between Jake and Naira deepened. As he looked at their children, now growing in strength and power, Jake realized that he had made the right choice. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They would face it together no matter what. The sun was setting over the vast city, casting a golden light that seemed to soften the edges of the towering buildings. Jake stood beside Naira on the balcony, his eyes scanning the horizon. The weight of the past few months had left its mark on him, but there was a sense of calm now, a quiet understanding that he had finally found his place in this strange world. The tension that had once gripped their lives had not disappeared completely, but it had softened. The royal council, after much debate, had finally accepted their family. Jake's role in the royal family was no longer questioned with every passing day. His children, who had once been seen as a threat, were now celebrated as the future of Naira's people. But even as the political storm seemed to settle, Jake knew there were still challenges ahead. The future of their family was still uncertain, and the demands on Naira, as the leader of her people, were immense. She had taken on the responsibility of raising their children to be strong leaders, and she carried the weight of the future on her shoulders. "We've come a long way," Jake said, breaking the silence. His voice was softer now, more reflective than it had been in the past. Naira turned to him, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Yes, we have," she agreed, her voice full of emotion. "It hasn't been easy, but we've made it through, together." Jake looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. Naira had been his rock, and she had shown him strength he didn't know he was capable of. Her dedication to her people, to their family, had never wavered. She had faced the pressure of her royal responsibilities while also being a mother, and through it all, she had never lost sight of what truly mattered, her family. Their first child, Lyra, was growing stronger every day. She had inherited not only Naira's grace and intelligence, but also Jake's resilience. She had already begun to show signs of leadership, displaying an ability to unite others with her words and actions. Lyra was the first of many, and Jake could see in her the promise of a bright future. The other children, too, were growing at an astonishing rate. Each one was unique, possessing different strengths and talents. Some could manipulate energy, others had enhanced speed or strength, and one or two had the ability to influence minds. These abilities, which had once seemed like a gift of great power, were now seen as a blessing by Naira's people. Their family had become a symbol of hope for a species on the brink of extinction. But as Jake watched Naira's children grow, he couldn't help but wonder about the future. What would their children face as they grew older? What challenges would they encounter that Jake and Naira could not foresee? The galaxy was vast, and even though their family had become a symbol of strength, there were always unknowns ahead. "I've been thinking," Jake said, his gaze never leaving the horizon. "About our children, about their future." Naira stepped closer to him, her presence warm and comforting. "I've been thinking about that too," she said. "What we've created together is more than just a family. It's a new generation, one that will carry the weight of our hopes and dreams, but we must prepare them for what's to come." Jake turned to her, his expression serious. "But are we truly prepared? I mean, what if something happens to us? What if we can't protect them from everything that might come their way?" Naira looked at him, her eyes filled with understanding. "We can't protect them from everything, Jake, but we can teach them. We can show them what it means to be strong, not just in power, but in heart. And we can teach them the importance of unity. Together, they will be able to face whatever comes." Jake nodded slowly, taking in her words. He had always believed in strength, in fighting for what was right, but he had never fully understood the weight of leadership until now. Being a father in this world, to children who were destined for greatness, had shown him that true strength wasn't just about power. It was about guiding those you love, protecting them when necessary, and letting them go when the time was right. The first few months of their children's lives had been filled with uncertainty, but now there was a sense of purpose. Jake knew his children were not just the future of Naira's world, they were the future of the galaxy. The blending of human and alien blood had created something entirely new, something the galaxy had never seen before. And though there were still those who feared what their family represented, Jake and Naira knew they had the power to shape the future, to make it better. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with shades of purple and orange, Naira took Jake's hand in hers. "We've been through so much together, Jake, but now we must look to the future. Our children will be the ones to carry our legacy, and I believe in them." Jake squeezed her hand, his heart filled with both pride and uncertainty. "I believe in them too, Naira, and I believe in us. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together for them." The sound of footsteps behind them interrupted their quiet moment. Lyra, their oldest child, stood at the doorway, her eyes bright with excitement. She had inherited Naira's intelligence and Jake's curiosity, and she was always eager to learn. "Mother, father," she said, her voice full of energy. "I've been practicing my energy manipulation. Would you like to see?" Naira smiled warmly, motioning for her to come closer. "Of course, Lyra, show us what you've learned." Lyra stepped forward, her small hands glowing with a faint blue light. She focused, and in an instant the light flared, forming into a ball of energy that hovered in front of her. The energy shifted and changed shape, swirling in the air like a miniature galaxy. Jake couldn't help but marvel at the display. She was growing more powerful every day, and her potential was limitless. As the energy ball floated before them, Lyra's gaze met Jake's. "Father, I want to be a leader like you," she said softly. "I want to protect our family just like you protect us." Jake's heart swelled with emotion. He had never expected to hear those words from her. He had always seen himself as just a man from Earth, someone who was thrust into a situation he hadn't planned for. But now standing before him was a child, his child, who believed in him, who wanted to follow in his footsteps. "You will be a great leader, Lyra," Jake said, his voice thick with pride. "You already are." Naira placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder, her voice filled with warmth. "You are our future, Lyra, and you will help shape the future of this world and beyond." Lyra smiled, her energy ball dissipating into the air. She was still so young, but her potential was already clear. Jake knew that the challenges ahead would be difficult. There would always be those who tried to tear them down, those who feared what they represented. But as long as they stood together, as a family, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would face it together. Naira, Jake, and their children, the new generation of a powerful, united family, were ready for whatever lay ahead. And with their strength, love, and determination, they would build a future that no one could take away. As the night fell and the stars began to shine brightly in the sky, Jake knew that the journey was far from over. But he was no longer afraid of the challenges they would face. Together, they were unstoppable. And with that thought, Jake embraced the future, confident that the legacy they had started would carry on for generations to come.